Okay, so yeah, as I say, today's seminar is with Nadia Moya and Fernando Escobar from the University of Colombia, Medellin campus, who will introduce themselves shortly. And they'll be sort of talking about their research that they do as professors and a sort of response to the themes that we've been looking at in the residency so far, so you might recognise them because they came and joined in on a couple, well, the first session that we had as well, the plenary. So that'll be happening between sort of 2 and 3:15, and as usual, it will be a kind of roughly 45 minutes to an hour presentation from them, and then sort of half an hour to 15 minutes for questions from you. So if you're able to put those via the chat whilst they're talking, that's a nice quick way for me to be able to sort of pick them up and pose them to them. If there's anything that's kind of comments or ideas, then yeah, just send those through either during the presentation or afterwards. And then we'll have a break, so you can get yourselves coffees and everything that we need for the activity in the second half, which is going to be based around, I'll let Nadia and Fernando explain it a bit more, but based around a sort of toolkit that they're interested in presenting to you and thinking about how you might apply it either with your practice or the projects that you're working on at the moment. So again, we'll use the breakout rooms for that, and sort of the feedback will happen via a representative of each group. And then just for the last sort of 10 minutes today, I wanted to just acknowledge the fact that we're in the final fortnight, the kind of last 2 weeks of the residency. So there's a kind of few things that I wanted to just go through with regards to sort of seeing the finish line in sight, which include thinking about what we're going to do post-Padlet. So the Padlet that you've been using to document all your projects, we'll be sort of thinking about how do we sort of archive that and use material to have a kind of final trace, a final collective trace from the residency. And we're looking at using this hot glue webzine thing. But again, I'll sort of introduce a bit more on that later on. So yeah, hopefully that's kind of useful to give you an idea of what's happening. And we've got everyone now that's going to be joining us for the session in. Clara, as usual, is here doing the sort of background technical stuff. Yeah, I'll just hand over to Fernando and Nadia straight away, and you should be able to share your screens. So yeah, welcome Fernando and Nadia.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Hi. Thank you for your invitation. We are very glad to be here. Well, here in Colombia, talking with you, not in Biela.
From Medellin.
From Medellin. But we think that's a very good opportunity for us to share some thinking, some problems that we have been working on from 2 years ago through our research about, at the beginning we can say about embedded art practices or social engagement, but we have problem with this kind of categories. So we are going to talk about this. So well, welcome. We're going to begin.
Yes.
Well, our presentation, the title is A Toolkit to Think Intersections Between Artistic Practices and Social Process in Latin America. We want to share what we call a toolkit, yes, not only for research practice in an academic term. We are professors in university, but as Fernando is going to explain now, we also have been practitioners, art practitioners, and we think that this kind of toolkit it's could be useful for some of you and to think this kind of processes and practices in this region. But also we want to discuss with you if this kind of toolkit could be useful for the other contexts. Yes. So first of all, we think that's very important. This is the context of our presentation. We are going to talk about where do we speak from. This is very important for us, like researchers. Our locus of initiation. Where do we speak from? The second point is like the general idea of this research that is called making the common, art practices and social processes in Latin America. And the third point is a brief overview of two cases of this research. The first one is a project called Museo más Comunidad, Museum plus Community, from Museo de Antioquia here in Medellin, and Proyecto Martadero. In English, it could be like Slaughter Art House Project.
Slaughter Art House Project.
Slaughter Art House Project, something like that. In Bolivia, in Cochabamba, Bolivia. Then we will talk about like the idea of the common in these cases, and how the common has emerged from a toolbox that we have constructed in the research process to talk about these cases. So then with the toolbox, we want to work in groups, in small groups with you to see how this toolbox could be useful. We are going to read some parts and other parts are going to talk with the images, but we are going to read some parts to make easier our communication with you because English is not our principal language, not the second one also. So, so we are going to do like an effort to communicate as well as we can, yes?
Maybe not broken English. Okay. Where do we speak from? Before getting started, we should note that we both share interest in a diverse set of practices that currently and in the past have taken place in the interstices between the fields of art, culture, and politics. A large part of this interest comes from our own practice as artists, researchers, cultural managers, professors, curators, and editors, and due to the condition of the artistic and cultural fields in Colombia, which demand this simultaneity of practices and roles. In our view, a research project on artistic and cultural practices is more akin to an artisanal process than to a process of instrumental reasoning. It is a mode of inquiry structured like a warp, that is, like a webwork where theories, materialities, and practices come into relation, rather than a unidirectional processes of inductive or deductive analysis based on empirical data. For this reason, we believe that it's of point to set forth an a priori theoretical framework to display our analysis. Instead, we assemble a toolkit that allows us to approach our case studies through conceptual contributions derived from different disciplines or traditions of thought, theories of art, new art histories, Latin American cultural studies, cultural geography, urban studies, critical theory, and what are known as forms of social knowledge. Therefore, we do not believe it pertinent to present analytical models a priori, but we are aiming to build a toolbox with conceptual and theoretical contributions from different disciplines or traditions. We are aware of the degree to which our research is traversed by particular relations of knowledge/power. As researchers and lecturers working in a university, we are in a position of privilege with respect to forms of social knowledge. For this and other reasons, we felt the need to establish methodological lines of inquiry wherein social agents would not be treated as objects of study, but rather as subjects of thought and knowledge. Accordingly, we decided to recuperate the life experiences of the people who lead and who were participants in the projects by organizing joint journeys or conversations at the site where each project took place. Although we were not able to do this in our cases, we conducted a significant number of interviews and conversations. This turned out to be extremely important for us, for the information shared by our interlocutors, as much as for the intensity of their narratives. The latter we embraced as text and textures that can be brought in the space of memory and which performatively register the effects that these projects have had to their organizers and participants.
Well, making the common art practice and social processes was, I'm going to put the
camera.
Yes, here.
Mm-hmm.
This research, we were working on this research since 2 years ago. We have the support of Prince Claus Fund, European Cultural Foundation, and also EVOS. And in this research, we ask about the intersections between art practices and social processes in Latin American, and we decided to do this by case of studies. As we told at the beginning, we were working on Museo Más Comunidad in Medellin, that is from Museo de Antioquia, a very well-known museum. Also Proyecto Martadero, that is in Cochabamba. This is a physical space. It was a slaughterhouse at the beginning of the 20th century, but it is not also physical space, it's also a cloud of organizations that began to work in 2004 and that remain active today in Cochabamba. And the last case was one from Colombia in Honda, a small city near from the capital, that was active between 2014 and 2015. We are not going to talk about this small case. We are going to talk about the other two that are bigger and more important, we think. We think that it's important to say that we don't use this kind of categories very well known in Europe and also in North America, like social engaged art or embedded art practices, because in this context, this kind of categories doesn't have an importance or are not strong in art discourses and art practitioners, yes? So if we attend to this kind of specificity, we have to think about the intersection between art practices and social processes that are of very different kind and have very different epistemological standpoints that transcends the categories narrowly constructed from the fields of art, yes? So, also, there's a very well-known category like community-based art that is also here in Colombia, you listening. But we think that in the case of Latin America, we have to attend to two things to talk about, to make questions about this kind of categories. The first one is that, for example, in Colombia, there's a very important historical relation between art practices and the movement of human rights since the beginning of the 1990s in the context of the internal armed conflict. Yes, Colombia, if you don't know, Colombia has a long armed conflict since the 1960s. We have 3-4 years ago, the government has signed a peace agreement with a guerrilla, but this was a very long conflict that is still live. I mean, it is not there. We also have a lot of violence phenomenon. So in this kind of context, artists and cultural agents have worked with rights movements since the 1990s. So they didn't were thinking about art in the sense of how the professionals like we are thinking about this. And the other thing is that in some places, like in Bolivia, there's not a professional field of art like the one that we can recognize in a city like in Medellin, yes. In Bolivia, Cochabamba is a city where there's no career to study arts, but there are a lot of practitioners of different kind of arts that we can say probably it's near to popular ones, it's near to other kind of traditional arts, but not this kind of contemporary field of art or contemporary agents and actors that are thinking how to move art to the social, to the grassroots movements or something like that. Yes, it's people that are practitioners and feel that the relation with the movement, the social movement is near, and they don't say, well, we have to put this together, no? So in this sense, we don't like to talk about social engaged or something like that, because these categories are familiar for professionals, no? For art professionals, but not for this context. In Colombia also, the politics of memory, the reconstruction of the social fabric, the collective memory, or the symbolic reparation of the victims of the internal conflict have been the main themes of this field of discussion, yes? So we have to take in consideration, first of all, this kind of specific situation to talk about this kind of issues. Also, in other places of Latin America, we have to make this kind of consideration. What are the historical conditions to talk about these intersections, no? For example, I'm going to put, es así, ¿no? An image, like an example, there's an image from Cochabamba, from the Bienal de Arte Urbano, that is, in Cochabamba, it's a very important event of contemporary art, but it's from graffiti practices, yes. So in this kind of events, like I was talking some minutes ago, there are a lot of different agents that are not necessarily professional contemporary artists, no? We are going to make a very brief overview of these two cases. We have shared with you some videos. It's difficult to talk about all these cases with all details because are long processes, a lot of meetings, of photographs, of meetings, yes, so processes, so that it's difficult to talk about them. But we would like to make a brief resume of these two cases. So, in the case of Museo Más Comunidad, let me see. Broadly speaking, Museo Más Comunidad was a project that activates encounters, journeys, aesthetic and artistic experiences that could facilitate exercise of collective memory, self-management of community projects, the acknowledgement of the territory through appropriation, and the resignification of its spaces through the lens of heritage. There's always the word heritage in this kind of exercises. Out of the activities and processes carried out within the framework of the project, we want to highlight the work that was carried out by a group of seniors, mostly women, from the neighborhood of Santo Domingo Sabio, who took on the names Vigías del Patrimonio. Well, this is images from Medellin, from this kind of neighborhood. Santo Domingo is, the history of Santo Domingo is a self-constructed neighborhood, very important in the story in the history of the city, because it's like an example of self-organization, of grassroots self-organization and self-construction. But it's one of the most, one of the neighborhoods that have the most, I don't know if the most, but one of the most effects of the urban war, from the guerrillas and the paramilitarism in Medellin and Colombia since the ends of the 90s and the beginning of this century. Yes, it's one of the neighborhoods more well known, unfortunately, by this situation. Yes, the urbanization. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a photograph from this place.
Metro cable.
And the metro cable is important here because, I mean, it is the state intervention, yes, to put in contact the center of the city with this peripheral neighborhood. And also, if you don't use the metro cable by car or by bus, you take like a lot of hours from the downtown.
Downtown is in the valley.
The downtown is in the valley, yes.
And the another neighborhoods are in the mountains to the east and to the west.
To the west.
Along the river.
Yes, sorry. Yes. So there were some experiences in this neighborhood, Santo Domingo Sabio, and also Popular. This is the other neighborhood that is near to Santo Domingo. And the image is about the route traced by Caminantes del Popular. This was an exercise with the people to make their own patrimonial routes, proper routes. And these people that were young people decide to make their routes with points that put in relation a bakery, a house where cappuccinos are sold, places where the young people meet, a place where cars and buses were washed because they were some important old men. And only there are, like, in this route, only 2 places that talks about the building or the intervention of the state. Yes, that is the Metrocable and also a cultural center. Yes, the people that we interview about this kind of routes, this experience, said that this route is the patrimonial one, really the patrimonial, the important one, because it's the one that people where people talk about their identity, their memories, and in the same way as the Caminantes del Popular, here are some from some of the photographs of the sessions with the groups making this kind of routes. This work was made with the museum. I mean, the museum began to talk about the people, what was important for them as patrimony, as heritage, sorry. So they began working this kind of workshops. Mm-hmm. And also there was another group, but this was the old women, sorry, that is called the Gardens of Heritage. And in this case, in the garden, in the route of the Gardens of Heritage, of course, they were all women that directly had the effects of the war. So these routes talk about places where killed some guys, mm-hmm. places as, for example, church, that's very important, that have all the names of the guys that were killed in this war at the beginning of this century. So 2 kinds of routes that talk about memory, but from 2 experiences: young people and the majors that had the two experiences of the heritage very different. Also, there was another experience that was for us very interesting to talk about the common. That was in another neighborhood that is called Ciudadela Occidente. In this place, it's in another very different place of the city. This neighborhood was very recently constructed. It's a multifamily building complex where the state had relocated a group of people from Moravia neighborhood. This is a neighborhood, a very, a neighborhood that was originally botadero basura,
Trash.
a trash. I don't know how to say in English, but a neighborhood that was with a lot of people from rural places that moved to the city, very near to the downtown, and they work with garbage. It was this kind of places. So the government made this new multifamily building complex for these people to move these people here. And when they relocated these people, they didn't think in their origins, their practices. They were really small apartments, no? And museum began to work with these people to make common places because they didn't have common places. We also have to say that in these places there were people that some years ago belongs to or guerrillas or also paramilitarism, and they were living together in this building complex.
Or victims
of both groups.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like a very difficult place where people didn't talk. People couldn't move from one building to other. Yes, this kind of state projects that are not very well planned. So museum began to work with women that knew a lot of gardens and plants because of its rural origins. So the activities were very, it seems to be very simple, but we're like to call women to make convites. Convites in Medellin is a kind of meeting that people make when they need to construct their house, to make something in common that they don't have resources, no? So it's a way that people feel link with the others to work together to construct the house, a way, etc. In this case, so they talk with these women to make community gardens, to think about nature and to think about this plant like the common. So the images that we are looking in this moment are some examples of this process. The effect of this project is really strong. We have visited the place with Consuelo Giraldo. Is an important leader there, and they are very nice. They love their community gardens. So we had noticed in this case, for example, this is a photograph of people of the women in a convite discussing where to put the plants, where like the design of the garden. Yes. This initiative, for example, was very strong to make possible the dialogue between different buildings. Yes, it's the beginning of a peace agreement between the inhabitants of these buildings. Today, all the neighborhoods have this kind of community gardens. But of course, for example, people that began to work with these women from the museum, they are not artists, contemporary artists. Yes, they are people from theater, people from pedagogy, yes, music, that they learn, they see what people love to do in these places and what kind of social interaction could be useful for this project. So it began like a museum intervention. Today is a project of this neighborhood, yes? Okay. Yes. This is a photograph of what we were visiting the last year. This is huerta. Huerta in English is well, the place where people have its proper food. Yes. Potatoes, carrots. That. Yes, and this is in the opposite side of the city from the Santo Domingo side. Is the opposite side. So today they have this kind of gardens and this kind of common places, and they are organized to use it for all the neighborhood. The other case is sorry, I didn't talk about this image. The plates. When in Santo Domingo Sabio, the museum worked with these heritage roots, then the women, the old women, decide to make some plates. But these plates were these ones, like are very ceramic plates, not elegant and bronze, no, ceramic plates that were put in the houses of these places that were important for their memory. In this case, for example, it was a house that was very important for the foundation of this neighborhood, that it was called La Casa Liberal, the liberal house. That was a place, because Santo Domingo didn't have a telephone at the beginning. They didn't have telephone. Yes, they didn't have telephone. So this house was the only one to have a telephone. So the people must communicate with this neighborhood through this house. There were two women that lived there, and they call them and they go out, say, Señor Pedro, they are calling you from another city. It was like the state service of phone, but there's no phone. No, there's no state phone. Today, yes. I mean, today is a very formal neighborhood, but 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it was very, a social-based constructed neighborhood. So this house was from the beginning of the foundation. And this is the image of the church that I was telling you, that there's a list of all these guys that were killed at the beginning of this century in this war that was that take place there between paramilitarism and guerrilla. Also, before this war was the intervention of the drug war in Medellin. No, Medellin had like different wars, not only drug, but different ones.
This is the list of them.
This is the list of the victims, but they were like more of them were young people. I mean, yes, young people that were killed in this war. This is the list. Another example of, so in this church they put a plate also to mark the space and to mark the road. Well, the other case is El Martadero. It's very different, a very different context, but at the end of the presentation, let me see how many times. We are going to highlight what are the things that are in common to think about this toolkit. No? It is.
Okay, in 1992, after raising pressure from local inhabitants concerned with sanitary public conditions at the Villa Coronilla neighborhood, the city was forced to shut down the slaughterhouse, this building. From that moment on, the building was put to different uses, among them a sports academy, a warehouse space for the public lighting company, and a deposit for goods confiscated. Later, the building fell into complete abandon, which accelerated in its deterioration, incidentally causing the decay of the surrounding urban space. In the early 21st century, Bolivia went through a deep social, political, and economic crisis, as you know, which provoked what are known as the water and gas wars. Two massive social mobilizations that foreshadowed Evo Morales' ascent to power. Amidst the climate of excitement of the former slaughterhouse building reopened its doors in 2004 to host 29 works by 25 artists who contributed to the second version to the National Biennial Prize for Contemporary Art, or CONART. The name in Spanish is Concurso Nacional Bienal de Arte Contemporáneo. With this event, Cochabamba became the first city in Bolivia to launch an open call event for contemporary art, incidentally earned in a place within the country artistic landscape. That same year, the group of artists in charge of CONART, led by Angelica Heckel and Fernando Garcia, obtained from Cochabamba City Council a bailment over the slaughterhouse building for 30 years. Immediately after receiving the bailment, they began to work on restoring and reforming the building.
This is an actual image of the slaughterhouse, yes?
This group of artists had been working under the name Nodo Asociativo Cultural, whose organizational structure was represented as a star with a central point of convergence known as the synergic zone. This image reinforced the collectivist principle of the Martadero project as it was taking form. The fact that a handful of collectives coming from different art disciplines decided to share a physical space and orient their practice towards a range of social concerns in line with the movements that emerged before 10 years ago, leads us to think that its synergic zone amounted to a commitment to the common. According to the artist Angelica Heckel, this movement signals the rise of the contemporary in local art, as well as its emancipatory and innovative character, being a form of art that encourages and enables connectivity. Along the same lines, connecting with others was perceived at the time as linked to the possibility of using the strategic capacity of contemporary art to take over an abandoned building and to create conditions for synergy among artists and between art and other dimensions of social and political life in Cochabamba.
I think it's important to say something here. Here, when we are talking contemporary art, we are talking about a biennial, a global format, yes, of art. This kind of experiences was really new for Cochabamba and for Bolivia. Yes, Bolivia is a country that has a very strong state political culture, politics of culture that are very to support the traditional expressions from Indian heritage. Yes, from the Aymaras tradition. So there's like the field of art in a very schematic point of view is like a very traditional formation, like the arts. I mean, a very traditional academic one, and there's another field that is the one that
Sorry, is that frozen up for everyone else as well? Yeah. We'll hope that it unfreezes and join, because that seemed like that was a bit of a cliffhanger moment to find out about what the difference is. Maybe we'll just give them a couple of seconds to see if it comes back on for us. Okay, well, maybe just sort of take the couple of minutes so far to have a think if there's any sort of questions that are coming up so far. I mean, I kind of feel like, I mean, it's just fascinating to hear about the Latin American context like that for me. But I think in general, if it's kind of, I mean, the bits that are coming up, it seems from sort of Nadia in particular, are this kind of idea around maybe there not being the separation between kind of social practice or sort of community activity, cultural activity, and the fine art kind of world, or the contemporary art. Or maybe there's more of a kind of separation and not as much of a need for those things to come together there. So I mean, they're things that I would be interested in finding out a little bit more about. Here we go. You're back on now, Fernando and Nadia. Sorry, I was just saying it was kind of, there was a cliffhanger moment there because you were just explaining the kind of difference between the social practices and the kind of and the contemporary art world. So maybe you can just carry on from that bit. That would be great. Do you want to just share your screen again?
It was the best part.
We are
exactly, yeah, it was the moment. It was kind of like, yeah, really on the edge of my seat there.
Yes, we were there's like in Bolivia, when we visit Bolivia, in Cochabamba and La Paz, we noticed that this.
Can you see it?
Perfect, great.
Yes, that this idea of contemporary was like the contemporary field of very different kind of agents and actors. But because there are like two fields very well identified, like the academic from the idea of the arts academy,
Mm-hmm.
and the fine arts of the 19th century. Yes, this kind of academy. And the other is like the art practitioners from the traditional on the Aymara tradition and the indigenous tradition. Bolivia, most of the inhabitants of Bolivia, like the half, more or less the half, yes, it's from indigenous groups, yes, self-identify as members of an indigenous group.
65%.
65%, yes.
65.
Is very different in Colombia. Colombia is a country that has a mestizo discourse of its history, the nation. Mm-hmm. So the indigenous people is like the 13 more or less of the inhabitants of the country. So it's very different, the situation, yes? And this different situation is the same in other kind of countries in Latin America. So when we talk about contemporary art or contemporary art practices, what we're talking about. So in this case, this CONART mm-hmm. was like a contemporary biennial, and it was the first one. And but if you talk today, they will say contemporaries. Not only that, no, contemporaries also the things that graffiti, it's also skate, it's also young people practitioners, yes, this kind, yes,
Yes.
this kind of practices is also from the contemporary parkour. So please continue. That is what it's important to make this note.
Yes. In our review, we turn to the Haeckel's ideas. Haeckel's remarks on the transformative power of contemporary art as the idea underlying the creation of the Martadero point towards the early emergence of Wagner for the common in this project. Although at the time they claimed to be working in defense of the patrimonial value of the building under a traditional framework, we find in their agenda a strategy of political resignification, which perceives the building as a common space for culture and art and as a collective cause, itself encouraged by the exercise of cultural rights of the part of citizens, which exert pressure on diverse political and state authorities.
Well, let me see the time. Yes. Probably we could say here with these images that the principal example or the principal case in this project that we notice that is like the best example to talk about the struggle for the common and the production of common in Martadero is this urban park that is called Ollantay. Martadero, the slaughterhouse, is a limit of it marks the difference, the social and economical difference of Cochabamba from the north and the downtown to the south, that is the poorest zone of the city. Yes, the slaughterhouse is like in this point, in this line of this frontier, yes, of this difference. And they had a place that was, I mean, like a corner of the
Villa Coronilla.
It is in the corner of Manzana. I don't know how to say quarter.
No.
Well, in a neighborhood that's called Villa Coronilla, that is it has a very strong social based organizations, but in this sense also there's like a contradiction. This social base is a very traditional in terms of popular based workers and also indigenous, yes. So young people making these kind of things is not very well accepted. It's like, this is very contemporary, very new, and it's not from our traditions. Yes, this kind of struggle. It's like, this is not from us, something like that. The struggles between tradition and these new practices. But what is very interesting is that from 2004 and today, these groups of practitioners of graffiti, parkour, began to meet each other in Martadero. It was like a place to call people to meet this. So there are a lot of groups in Martadero today. There are a hip hop ensemble that is called Essential Root, the workshop of urban acupuncture, they are architects, the breakdance collective Matarifes Villa Coronilla, the skateboarding group Team Lata Skate, the Laboratory for Creative Communities, Asociación Kushka, that are some women that make ceramics, the NAM School of Parkour. Okay, I mean, and we are talking about very different kind of groups that are not only young, also this kind of women, but they see themselves like a cloud of different projects that promote the cultural rights. Yes, the cultural rights. Also, they belong to a network that is called Telartes, and they are working in Bolivia to make a policy for a love of culture in Bolivia. There's not a love of culture to make possible this kind of practice. Yes. We think that this Ollantay Park is like the example of how people, as how practitioners negotiate with the state to make things for all of us in a very, I think, in a very intelligent way. I mean, they had these groups that were working together, but they began to pressure to the state to have this place that was abandoned. And 8 years of working together, of pressure to the state, made possible to have this place. The design is made by the people of Martadero and these young people. Yes, it's a participant design. And in like a conclusion to close this part, we can say that this kind of initiative destabilize the traditional understanding of heritage in Bolivia, yes? But at the same time use the traditional notion of heritage of the building to struggle for the common, yes? They move in the traditional discourses of heritage, but also they destabilize and they question the heritage that making possible to make this kind of new practices, no? So they move in that kind of intersections that are, of course, not white or black, that are in the middle in some interstices in some ways to move to make possible this kind of spaces. Well, another example of this kind of, yes. So, what we notice in this case is that there was a question that we made at the beginning that was, what can art practices do in the territories and in these places? I mean, if there's no like a strong art project to make possible this kind of relations and to think together the situation, but there are some social knowledges in these places. We notice that the most important thing is to make possible the common, to construct the common in these small places, yes? Small neighborhoods, we are not talking about the city, no? We are talking about very, very small places. What we think is that to think about the common, to think about these intersections between art and social practices, it is very important to think about, first of all, in territory. Yes, we began to think about what the territory is putting on what problems, what are the spaces that are in struggle in these cases. So there are like 3 areas, more or less, that we think together in these cases. And we think that they are really useful to think this kind of experiences in Latin America. The social processes, the traditions, or the experiences of some social processes, the characteristics or the problems or some aspects about the territory, and also the notions of art practices, artistic practices, in a very open mind way to think about it. Yes, what are they talking about art when they are doing this kind of practices? And we see the common, like the harrow that connect all these three areas, yes, and that they must put in the same level of importance the social processes. They can move, the territory situations, and the artistic practices. There's another thing to say here. There's a very well, I mean, in Latin America, there's a strong tradition about art for social change. Yes, this kind of idea that art is like an instrument for the social change. And this is a very strong imaginary in Latin America since the 1970s. Yes, from the left-wing movements, yes, the left-wing movements of the 70s, the Latin Americanist thinking that art must be not at the same level of social processes and social discourse, but like an instrument of it. So what we want to change is the terms of the discourse. Yes, our practices has a lot of tools, and it's a form of knowledge that brings things to articulate with social processes and territory. Yeah, and they are in the same level to think about this. Yes, it's like the idea. So what is the toolbox? The toolbox is some like concepts or keys to think about these three areas, to take in consideration in the research process, but also in the experience of talking with people, to understand the specificity of the cases. So in the case of social processes, for example, a question that is very important for us is, what is the experiences of the popular organization forms in the territory? Yes, what kind of leaderships there are there? What history of organizations? What's history of grassroots movements? What kind of experience there are there now? Because there's really a difference between places where are traditions of social movements and grassroots movements, and also what are the identitary narratives.
And its resources.
Okay, and its resources. Yes. In the territory, there's a question that for us is really important. I mean, this is a very Latin American question, the state presence. Yes?
Yes,
the state presence. Because state presence marked the difference, a lot of difference between the organizations that work with art practices and those, what is trying to move with art practices in their territories, and all the cloud of rights, of civil rights, of another kind of rights. Yes, so state presence is like the common of the three cases. All people talk about there's no state presence, or the state presence is policy, is a state presence that only give this kind of sources, but not these ones. We have to construct ourselves all this change. Yes.
Is the idea of estado de bienestar?
But I know how to say in
English.
English.
In English, it's the opposite of.
Is the opposite of the behavior state, estado de bienestar.
In Europe.
In Europe, that is like the idea of the state give health, education, security, yes, to all people. No, like this is like the state is not here. State is not here, and we have to work together because there's no state. Yes. Of course, the political significance of the space. Yes, this kind of cases there are some places like the slaughterhouse, and there in the case of Medellin,
the place
mark the spaces. So there are like small marks in the space, but the idea is to make another discourse or narrative of these spaces in a political way, in terms of new memories. Politics of memory is very strong here. Of course, everyday neighborhood life is the first question in the research. How these people, how these experiences related with the neighborhood in the everyday life. If this has any kind of resistance also in people. Another very Latin American theme is the legal and illegal economies in these territories. In the case of Colombia, I mean, you can't think about this without this key concept. Yes, it's legal and illegal. The struggle of the territory by these forces. Also in the cities, but also in the country. Yes, well, in the countryside.
The
yes.
countryside, yes.
And the other thing is that, of course, these cases also talks about urban settlements, not formal ways of planning the territory, self-construction, and this kind of practices very well known in Latin America. In the area of artistic practices,
it represents more or less 75–80% of the cities in Latin America. The urban settlements, the majority of the city.
No.
Yes.
Yes, that the cities in Latin America, the 80% of the cities of Latin America are urban settlements. Yes.
Informal.
Formal, not planned by the state.
Yes.
And in the area of artistic practices, yes, that is like, well, what we think that artistic practices are we must think about them, not only the ideas of artistic practices that we have as professionals, yes, also how people think about this, and always we notice that there are strong struggles between heritage, yes, between heritage, the cultural appropriation of this heritage. Memory is always working here. And for us, of course, the cases took place in off-center places of the cultural circuits, yes? We are not talking about projects that are in the downtown or in the or visible for the art field, no, in the terms of the more near to the global scheme or the contemporary scheme. No, they are in peripheral neighborhoods. But even though there's something that is important to say, these cases always have support from big organizations, international ones, and for example, Chris Klaus, and also Museo de Antioquia. I mean, Museo Más Comunidad, Museo Más Plus Community is a project that was organized by Museo de Antioquia with the support of grassroots organizations in these neighborhoods. So there's like negotiations, strong negotiation with organizations that have the cultural capital and the political capital to make them possible. And there's also very important connections with international field, yes? There are complex relations. There are really complex relations that are absent to the cultural sequence in the cities, but the people are working in an international network or with the support of central institutions. There's another thing that there is not in the image, but the notion of popular, vernacular, and high arts, yes, always are negotiating these kind of categories all the time. Well,
and memory,
but memory we have said. I mean, memory is always in struggle in these cases. So what we want to ask you and to invite you is to think about this toolbox, these categories that, of course, one of them we know that is not exclusively from Latin American cases or the cases that we work, but we want to know, what do you think about this? These categories for your experiences, for your processes, for your processes. as we told at the beginning, we are professional researchers, but we thought about this kind of toolkit because we also are practitioners, and talking with the people, we know that we can use these big ideas, theory ideas, or paradigms to talk about this kind of practices.
That's fantastic, Nadia and Fernando. Thank you so much for a brilliant presentation. Like really enlightening, just in terms of like hearing about the actual, the Latin American context, and you've used some really, sort of pertinent examples there to kind of like bring up quite a lot of examples and sort of show, I suppose, there's a lot in there that will resonate with where other people are doing their practices as well. I think, I think we can all sort of find something in there to identify with, and then also the things that you've pulled out, which are very specific to either the Colombian or the Bolivian sort of context, are really important as well. So brilliant to hear from you, and kind of very important at this stage in the residency as well, where I think, we have spoken a lot about this type of work, but also mostly in a sort of European context, and sort of move it into something where, as you say, like a place with a tradition of the blurring of art and life in the same way that has happened in Latin America. Following on also from last week, talking about Arte Util and Tanya Bagheera, and kind of where that idea of art as a tool has come from. It's a fantastic sort of progression from that, as well as bringing in quite a lot of new stuff for us to think about. So we'll go back, not right now, but to the slide that you've shown at the end there with this toolkit that's kind of looking at the idea of thinking about the production of the common as something that draws a line between social processes and the territory that you're in, and the artistic methods that you're bringing, or the infrastructure. I think it might be useful to we'll bring that back up after the break, and then kind of allow people to work in groups on that. But it's really good to have it for now. But yeah, let's kind of we'll look at this again. Just before the break. But before we do that, I was just wondering if it's possible to just address a couple of the comments or questions that have come up just before we go for a break. So there's a couple, a very sort of I guess people are from Fernando, from Francesco, just wondering about those kind of informal settlements that you kind of were describing in Medellin and elsewhere, like how they actually come about, and do people sort of help each other building houses, as an example, and kind of the how do these kind of informal settlements spring up, and what is the kind of level of collective activity that allows those places to materialize?
Sorry, I'm trying to look to the question in the chat, but who made that question?
So it's from Fernando. I guess it's just kind of being interested in how those informal settlements function, or how they come about.
But I understand it from Venezuela people.
Francesca, do you want to kind of clarify what it is that you're asking? You need to.
Yeah. Hello. Hi.
Hi.
No, I was just wondering how do those processes of collective working, for example, for the one that brought the public garden, the neighborhood garden. I mean, how do they work? I mean, do the people that have some needs just go around and ask for other people help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we talk about something that in Colombia is called convite. Convite.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very popular way. It's a popular knowledge where people when wants to construct a house or something in its neighborhood, his proper house also, call to the vecinos, to the vecinos, neighbor, I don't know how.
Neighbors.
The neighbors,
Okay.
yes, the neighbors. and give food
And drinks.
to receive their help to construct the house.
Okay.
To build.
Yes, to build.
Or
The 60% of the neighborhoods of this city were made with that kind of social knowledge cooperation. I mean, it's very well known in Medellin, in Colombia, but in Medellin is very special. It's different from the capital, from Bogota. So it's very, the Museum of Antioquia didn't have to go to say, we are going to make something new that is called convite. No, we know what's convite, yes? So it's only to say, we're going to make a convite for a communal garden, communitary garden, yes? But what was the key of this? Each woman must put in the convite a plant related with its proper memory from its proper place, because these women are victims of the armed conflict. They are refugees. So they come from they are displaced. They are displaced, not refugees. In Colombia, we don't talk about refugees.
No.
Displaced, yes. So they talk about this plant is from the town, from my own town, and they talk about this, how they arrived to this neighborhood. So the community garden is not a community or garden only because it's a common place between the buildings. It's also like the symbol of this of this new space for them, because they belong to other places. No, it's like a new community with these plants.
Yes.
This is the kind of symbol that
like a geography of memory. Maybe.
It's like a geography of memory. Yes.
Something like that.
So what made the museum? The problem is in this place, when the museum arrived, Ciudad de la Nueva Occidente, this neighborhood, was in a war between two illegal groups for the control of the drugs, of the drug traffic. That's very, this was very normal in Medellin. Still now, yes? There are invisible frontiers from some parts of a neighborhood. You can move from that because it has the control of an illegal group. So this neighborhood, some buildings were from some illegal groups, from the control of some illegal groups, another from the other. So they can move between the buildings. This is the kind of control that made this kind of groups. Not only drugs trading, also the control of the people. You can move. So when they decided to put the garden in the middle of the two
buildings,
of the two zones, yes. The two zones. So this common space made possible to make the dialogue and the transit between the two buildings. Yes.
Like a gray zone or.
Yes. Yes, something like a gray zone. But what made the museum? The museum, the people say they put the spark. They put the spark to feel us stronger, to make things possible. Because Museum de Antioquia is the most important museum of the city. If you arrive there, of course, you have like a power not to be, not to feel with fear. To be afraid with this kind of illegal groups. And as we said in the presentation, after the museum, after the end of the project, they could make this project as a proper project. But there's something that is important here. there are very important leaders in this neighborhood. I mean, there are leaders that came from all the movement of displaced victims that had a lot of capacity to call people. If there is now this kind of leaders, I think it's not the same. It's difficult to think this project without this kind of social leaders.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, a nice bit of insight as well, and I hope that sort of gives you a bit more of a answer to the question, Francesco, and also Cheesy's kind of also introduced the idea, just wondering what the kind of different negotiations that might have to happen in those places are. So I think you've addressed that as well. Just before we go for a 10-minute break, so we can do the next stage and have time to do it. There was just something from Carilla there, just asking about what your sort of personal relationship is to these kind of communities that you've used as case studies. Are they places that you know intimately or have lived, or what's your sort of involvement, personal connection there with those places?
Our personal connection, well, it's difficult, but because we are not from Medellin, we are from Bogota, from the capital. But Fernando has been working in Moravia as artist and curator since
2007, maybe,
and
between 2007 and 2011.
More or less.
And after, I was a curator of MGE, the Encuentro Internacional de Arte, del Museo de Antioquia.
I mean, a professional relation. But what we tried in this research was to, at the beginning, we told you that we try to make a lot of interviews, but not a formal interview in this kind of, not a formal one. A lot of conversations, many conversations. Of course, this kind of research creates new relations, new relationships. So now we have some relations with some of them, not all of them, but we think that it's, of course, we have a relation of power with these kind of places because we are professors of the National University. So when you talk with them, we are professors. Oh, okay. Of course, it's impossible to not notice this kind of difference. But we think that this kind of connections is very important because these groups and this neighborhood need people like Fernando and I to put their struggles and their interests in a public sphere different from the local, the neighborhood, to be visible and to have the support of Museo Antioquia because it's important for their local struggles. So we think that even though we have a social, a knowledge, saber poder, a position that of course we are academic people, yes, and there are social leaderships and this kind of difference. They know also that they need this kind of relation for their support, to not be afraid, but also to put their struggles in the public sphere.
It's in the two directions.
It's a benefit into the two ways.
That's a very nice way of sort of describing that element, and think it'd be really useful to think about that in this exercise, I think, with the toolkit as well, because obviously there's the positioning of the self within that kind of diagram as well. And some people may feel that they're, if you're working in a place that you're from, you're both within the territory and maybe the social processes, but also trying to bring that new thing or different perspective or kind of additional resource that isn't already there. So let's kind of take a break. We'll make it 10 minutes because the 5-minute break is quite short. So if we come back at 25 to the hour, then we can break out into the rooms to sort of Nadia and Fernando will explain it again, but we'll sort of go back to their sort of the diagram of the toolkit and give you some time to sort of think about that, your own practices through that lens, and then feedback to us. So see you in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks again to Nadia and Fernando for an excellent presentation, of course. Thank you.